it's Taylor Rose, and welcome back to my channel where we talk about everything reading and writing. So it's been a bit since I have recorded a video. I had a few scheduled during our trip, but we just got back from 2 weeks in Japan, which was great. I was super scared leading up to the trip for some reason. Like, I could barely function, really, which sounds so stupid because, you know, I used to live there. But I was just so anxious about traveling, I guess. I don't know. So unfortunately, in November, I did not actually read very much. My husband took Japanese classes in college, but obviously never used it. So I was the one doing like all the communicating and map stuff, navigating through train stations, yada yada. It was really funny. He got brave once and decided to go to the konbini by himself, the convenience store. And he worked himself up like, oh, I can do like the aisatsu exchange with the cashier. And then it was this Indian guy who spoke English. So he went in with the spirit, I guess. So unfortunately, because of that, you know, usually like if it was me by myself doing normal day-to-day stuff, like I would have very easily been able to read while on the train or what have you, but being in new places that I hadn't been in made it much more difficult. We spent kind of a week and a half-ish in Tokyo, and I really never went to Tokyo while I lived there, maybe twice for only like a few days, Disney Sea. And then we went to Kyoto, which I've been to maybe 5 times, and then Nagoya, which is basically where I lived. So those days, it was way easier because I already was familiar with the train stops and the bus stops and that sort of thing. But the rest of the time, it was also the first time I've taken the Shinkansen by myself. Obviously, like if you go over there with the JET program, they take you on the Shinkansen, presumably, to your assignment, the school you're going to work at, if it's far enough from Tokyo. But it was the first time I bought Shinkansen tickets on my own. And, you know, it's been so long. Now they have Suica, like the IC travel card on your phone. You don't even need to go get one. You can just reload it with your credit card really easily. That was fantastic. You can get Shinkansen tickets on your phone now. You don't even need to print anything. So much easier than I was expecting, because when I lived there, it was like 99 times out of 100, they're not taking your credit card. They're not taking anything on your phone. You need to pay cash. You need to be able to navigate a machine in Japanese. So definitely there's a lot more English stuff, but it was pretty great. I got to see 2 of my old coworkers, and one of whom has had several children since then. And I also saw a married couple friend that we had made while we lived there. Me and my friend, who also went around the same time as us. So that was so fun. Anyways, y'all don't want to hear about my trip. But let's talk about what I read in November. So I finished off October with Bunny by Mona Awad. Unfortunately, I did not get the sequel until the very end of November, so I haven't read or finished it yet. But I did finish 4 books and get partway through several others. So the first book that I finished in November was The Lavender Blade by E.L. Deards. I'm assuming I'm pronouncing that right. So it is a fantasy novel set in kind of Victorian-ish England, leaning a little more steampunk, basically in a world where there are exorcists. Exorcism is like a big part of the religion, basically. And we are following a man named Colton, who is an exorcist. He was raised as one by his mother, who was from a long line of exorcists, but unfortunately, she died when he was very young. And so he's been living on the streets, really kind of a rough and tumble life. He, you know, has a drinking problem, and he doesn't actually believe in exorcism. He doesn't believe in demons. He thinks all of it's just made up crazy stuff, a way for people to manipulate others. So he basically goes around performing exorcisms by figuring out what's really going on. Kind of detective-y vibes here, but it's not like a serious thriller detective-y story or anything, where basically he'll go in, assess people's problems, figure out what's causing the problem, and then as part of his like exorcism ceremony, he implements changes to their home, their lifestyle, or whatever to fix the problem. For example, in one of them, the family keeps having their kitchen ransacked, and he connects the dots and realizes, oh, it's these cats that come in and they're bored. So he secretly went around the house putting out cat toys and kind of like hinted to the people like, oh, you should do these things that would distract the cat, but under the guise of like keeping away evil spirits. So while Colton is doing this for money, he runs into a man from the noble class named Lucien Belmont, I think. And Lucien is basically like, I want to hire you. Actually, we'll work together. And very quickly is established that neither of them believe in these demons or anything, but Lucien has a plan, and he wants to use these like fake exorcisms as a way to gain kind of political power within the upper class, so the Ivory District. And this is because he is kind of ostracized from his family for some reasons that Colton doesn't really know the details about, but there have been a lot of rumors floating around the city. So it is a romance. Their banter is super cute. I really enjoyed like their conversations and how they kind of grew together as people through the story. Because obviously both of them have a lot of baggage from their childhoods and young adulthood. One complaint that I saw a lot in the reviews for this book is how it kind of skips over a lot of the exorcisms in the middle and kind of like will just summarize things that have happened. And maybe that would be more upsetting reading it, but I did listen to the audiobook version of this. I received the e-arc on NetGalley. Even though this book was published back in July, they were still giving them out. And listening, I didn't have any problem with this, probably because the narrator, Nicholas Bolton, did an incredible job setting up this kind of like conversational atmosphere, like from Colton's POV. So I personally felt like it struck a good balance between summarizing events that happened and actually like going through all the details. I know that's a problem in a lot of books where they'll summarize things and it's like, we really needed to have seen it for this to have any emotional impact. But I didn't really feel like we needed to see all of these exorcisms. The plot was more what the exorcisms got them, you know, but that's personal preference. I definitely did pick this book out because it was comped with Gideon the Ninth. I will say, I don't think it was as quirky as Gideon. The world building, while interesting and very unique, definitely didn't have the same depth as Gideon the Ninth in its the subsequent books in that series. I will say it felt like in the last third, they introduced a lot of world building through like technology that really should have been introduced in the first parts of the book, because it solved some issues that kind of made it come off as like too convenient, if that makes sense. I don't want to give away too many details because I did actually like really enjoy the book overall and the story. And I don't think there was anything wrong with any of the plot events, but it did just feel flimsier than it would have, I think, if more of this technology that you see a lot of at the end was implemented more thoroughly throughout the story. I did give this 4 stars. I didn't have any issues with the storytelling style. I did feel occasionally it got really graphic and then went back to normal several times, which kind of took me out a little bit. Not that there was anything wrong with those scenes. It's just usually I wasn't expecting it the first time. So, you know, I was listening it to while I was in the shower or something trying to shave, and I was like, oh, like I was not expecting that sentence to pop out of nowhere, but otherwise, you know, I think the narrator did a really fantastic job setting the mood and really like getting into Colton as a character. So I highly recommend it if you like Victorian era steampunky LGBT love stories. I mean, I didn't have any major issues with it that jumped out at me. The second book that I read was Hemlock and Silver by T. Kingfisher. This was recommended to me by a librarian friend, and I can see why. I loved it. 5 stars from me. I'm excited to read other works by Kingfisher, but this one was recommended to me specifically because it is kind of a Snow White retelling, and I love fairy tale retellings. They're definitely one of my weaknesses, I guess you could say. This story follows a healer named Anya. She's kind of quirky. She's in her mid-30s, kind of a loner. She's obsessed with poison. So she goes around testing stuff, trying to find antidotes and cures for different issues. And so she's kind of made a reputation for herself for solving problems like that. And one day, while she's just minding her own business, guess who shows up? The king of her country. He waltzes into her home and is basically like, hey, I have a job for you. And of course, he's the king. She can't say no. So she goes with him to one of the royal estates to try and figure out what's happening to his daughter. His daughter, Snow, is mysteriously ill, but no doctors have been able to figure out what's wrong with her. And so the king believes she is being poisoned, and it's up to Anya to figure out by what and how is she, poor Snow, being poisoned. There is a talking cat side character. Loved him. Another one of my weaknesses. I thought that the concept behind this was super unique. Again, I don't want to spoil it because it's part of the mystery, but blew my mind. Loved it. Another thing that I really loved is the climate that this world is in, or this country is in. It's basically, imagine Arizona, New Mexico, Southwestern America, deserts, cactuses, a lot of lizards. We have snakes. It's hot. I thought that was super fun. I mean, it might just be my reading habits, but I very rarely remember reading anything set in this type of climate. Usually we're going forests, snow, maybe the seaside, not barren desert with poisonous lizards jumping out at you and stuff. So that was super fun. Looking at the blurb at the end of the book, I believe the author lives in Arizona, which, you know, explains why. She's probably inspired by that. One thing I really enjoyed is that the main character, Anya, is like super socially awkward. It was very relatable. She would just kind of panic and say stuff and then be like, why did I say that? Which was super funny. She was, I giggled several times while reading. I read this on the plane flying to Japan. Highly recommend. It seems like Kingfisher's books are just like largely well received, so I'm excited to try some of her other works. I don't know if I'm ready to get into a series quite yet, but she does seem to have quite a few standalones, so if you have any recommendations. The third book that I successfully finished in November was The Jasad Crown by Sarah Hashem. As you know, I did read the first book, The Jasad Heir, in October, and I made a 2-hour video talking all about it because it could have been so good. It could have been so good. And unfortunately, this second book did not redeem anything. My gut reaction after finishing it the first time was 2 stars, but I did read it very broken up throughout over 2 weeks whenever I could on the Shinkansen, or when we're sitting on the train for 30 minutes, or we're just sitting somewhere trying to rest our feet. So personally, I am the type of reader where I don't like reading if I can't sit there and get 50% through in one go, minimum. I really prefer sitting and finishing the whole book in one go, or in the afternoon and then finishing it the next morning or something. So I will go ahead and say that I think maybe this colored my interpretation of the story. I'm planning on rereading it this month and making another video talking about it, since I already did the first one, but I don't know. So don't listen to this if you don't want spoilers, but this book picks up immediately after the first one ends. We have Sylvia captured by the Orabi rebellion group, whatever, and they've taken her to their mountain hiding place. One thing that I do think that this book did better than the other one is that there were more chapters from other POVs. So there's many more chapters from Aaron instead of just the 3. And there are also chapters from Sepha and Marek's point of views. I will say, I don't think Marek's chapters contributed anything really to the plot. Nothing that explains in those chapters or even hints in those chapters why something's important. It just kind of felt like they were like, hey, Marek, go do this thing. Okay, I did the thing. And that was it. And then 2 chapters later, we're in Aaron's POV, and it finally gets explained why Marek was doing this stuff. So, I don't know. I didn't love it. I really loved Sepha's character in the story. Like, her point of view chapters were really interesting. I think there needed to be twice as many, and obviously twice the plot content. Most of Sylvia's chapters I felt would have hit better if they were from someone else's point of view, because it just felt like what was supposed to be happening and what Sylvia is telling you is happening doesn't actually match up with what Sylvia is doing or how Sylvia is feeling. Obviously, the Arabi have a plan that they need her to enact, and she's basically like, this plan sucks, but we're going to go along with it anyways. And meanwhile, she's like, I'm going crazy. Like, my feelings are just dying. Like, I can't feel anything. But then she repeatedly would just describe all of these feelings she's having. So it's like, if she's really supposed to be like pulling into this like emotionally dead character that she keeps saying she is, I don't know. It just didn't get portrayed very well, in my opinion. But I am going to reread it and see maybe if going at it in one go will change my opinion. Just from this first go through, I felt like none of the events really were connected. Like, they were connected because people told you they were connected. They weren't connected because logically you are going on that journey. You know, Aaron's chapters were definitely the best part. I don't know. It kind of felt like a lot of stuff was happening just because it's the kind of thing that happens in a romantasy. That's all I'm gonna say on that for now. My first read through was 2 stars. I just was so disappointed. Yeah, I was like sitting on the plane ranting at my husband. Like, I can't believe this is what is happening in this book. Ugh. And it has one of the biggest pet peeve endings of mine ever, which I'm not going to spoil it here, but it just gives me the ick, and I was upset that that's what we went with. And the book never explains how the cuffs work. That was like the major question from book 1, and it never addresses it. I was so upset. Anyways, immediately after that, I started reading The Rose Bargain by Sasha Payton Smith, and it is, I'm pretty sure it's a YA novel, but it is basically Bridgerton cross The Selection with some fae thrown in. We are in a world, it's England, Victorian England, except it's not Victorian England because there's no Queen Victoria, where basically during the War of Roses, a fairy queen came onto the battlefield and basically backstabbed everyone, so that now she's the Queen of England, and she's been the Queen of England ever since. So like 400 years. And she gives each citizen one bargain with her. So it's kind of like a big thing that people go and make their bargain to try and improve their lives. And we are following a girl named Ivy. She is kind of part of the noble class, but her family has fallen due to a number of circumstances, and she is desperate to save her family. Because she's part of the noble class, it is a tradition that the noble girls make their bargain, their rose bargains, because generally they're wishing to be more beautiful, on the day that they debut into high society. So everyone else gets to choose when to make their bargain after they've come of age, except for the noble girls, who are all kind of forced to make it on the same day. And Ivy goes to it's called the Pact Parade, where Queen Moore, so the Fae Queen, reveals that her son, Prince Bram, is going to take a wife. So these girls have to sign a contract in blood that they are entering a competition to marry Prince Bram. So of course, Ivy sees this as an opportunity to save her family. So she immediately goes up, signs her name, and she's in the competition. However, the competition isn't quite what it seems because Queen Moore has a sadistic streak. So they are having to complete these bizarre, dangerous trials while Queen Moore basically watches laughing. Very quickly, Ivy is kind of conscripted by the second prince, Prince Emmett, who is actually Queen Moore's stepson through her current mortal consort, to win. Ivy doesn't really expect to win, but she knows that by even being in the competition, her family is already, able to access more social opportunities that they weren't able to previously. So she's kind of swept along by Emmett, who wants her to win because he believes she will be able to dethrone Queen Moore if she is crowned twice. So it is a love triangle between Bram, Emmett, and Ivy. I will say I did give this 3 stars because the first 15 chapters were fantastic. I was whipping along, reading, super into it. And then all of a sudden, after chapter 15, the writing quality, I felt like it just dove off a cliff. At the beginning, it was like very well paced. There's lots of like vibrant description. I had a really clear idea of what the world is supposed to look like. The character emotions felt real. They were like interlocked with the dialogue. So it felt real, as real as reading a book is. And then after that, all of a sudden, it was like all the character action was really separated from the dialogue. So it was like none of the dialogue felt like anything. I wasn't sure about any of the character motivations at this point because they would think one thing and then say something else. And most of the description's gone at this point. Just occasionally it would come in and like describe people's dresses and stuff. And it was just like, what happened? It felt like a rough draft. Like they had just spit out dialogue and actions that they wanted in the plot, but then never went back to rewrite it to the same quality as the first chunk of the book. I don't know. It was so bizarre. And despite that, I still, it was still easy to read because like I said in the Jasad Air video, there were so many times where actions were assigned to dialogue from a different person. So you think the dialogue's person B, but it's actually person A. And then it would just like flip around all the time and was very confusing. This didn't have that problem. Like it was very clear who was saying what when, but it just all of a sudden went from like a 3D feeling story to like, bam, 2D paper cutouts being shuffled around on a tabletop. So I don't know. I also didn't believe the love triangle at any juncture because it is primarily developed after this point. So it was like what we were hinting at before chapter 15. I was like, oh, I see where we're going. Like getting your hints, okay? And then after that, it's just like, he's so beautiful, I can't take my eyes off him. Out of nowhere. Like, you went from 1 to 100. Just like super fast. I don't know. And I don't know whether to attribute this to it being YA. I don't know. because the first 15 chapters didn't have that problem. Like, I don't know. But yeah, unfortunately, that means I'm not really interested in continuing the series. I mean, like, it does end on a cliffhanger. There's more books happening, but I don't know. If the writing quality is gonna be like this the whole time, like, I'm not gonna feel engaged. Like, it was a struggle finishing because of how flat everything was. And occasionally there would be a scene that was like up to the same standard as the first part of the book, and then it would go back to being flat. Nothing. I don't know. It was very strange. I think if you just want like a really quick read where you don't have to think much at all, this is the book for you. But I don't know. I like feeling dug in. Like I need to keep reading to find out what's happening. Like I feel what they're feeling, and I just didn't get that from this. Super disappointing. So those are the 4 books that I finished. Not a great track record so far, but I did start and not finish multiple books. So like, let's take a look. So I did start reading the Porcelain Menagerie by Gillian Fosberg. This is an arc from NetGalley. It is, so this book is set in 18th century Dresden, Germany, and at least the chapters I've read are following a young boy named Johann Candler. He grows up under a religious father, like his father's the local priest or something, and he wants to become an artist due to some things that happened in his childhood. So he goes off to apprentice. That's kind of where I got, only about 10% of the way through. And so far, not due to any issues with the book. But it definitely is kind of a darker vibe. And there is a content warning. And then when I got the arc, the author sent a content warning to my email. Automated probably, but because I was just so nervous going up to the trip, I have an anxiety problem, guys. Like I started reading and then the content warning part just like really threw me off, and I just like couldn't deal emotionally with it. So I do intend on reading this in December. So far, no issue, loving how it's written, but I just was so anxious I couldn't do it. It was actually published at the end of October. So this was another one that I got the arc after it was published. Fingers crossed I will keep going on this. But it has to do with the king it seems like the king is kind of like a dangerous figure at this time. So we're going to see how Johann's career gets pulled into the king's orbit. There's also supposed to be chapters from another character's point of view in the past. So that's what the content warning was about. I don't know. We'll see. The next book that I started and didn't finish was Immortal Consequences by Ivy Marie. This is another YA book, which I don't have any problem with YA. It is set in an academy, basically. They're essentially Grim Reapers, it seems, full of teenage souls who they almost died as children, and so when they finally died as a teenager, their soul was like selected to come to this academy where they train to go and reap souls stuck kind of between the afterlife and the life. Every 10 years, a student is selected to join this like elite team of these spiritual magic people, or they can choose to cross over to the other side. But this year, the decennial isn't just choosing the best student, it's going to be a competition. And so far, I haven't had any issue with the book. It is YA, so it does kind of spell a lot of things out that you really should be able to pick up from context clues. But there are 6 point of view characters. Why? So far, it's like I got 64% of the way through, and it's like we just jump between characters so often, and the chapters kind of spell the same things out. It's just been very tedious so far. I feel like we finally settle into a character's point of view, and then bam, next chapter, we're one of the other 6 people. I really think if it had been cut down to 3 of these people, that probably would have been better. It's not so awful in that these 6 characters do kind of group off into 3 pairs, but we do get chapters from every single one of their point of views, and it came off, it's unnecessary. I think it gives you a lot to follow and not a lot of ground to do the following, if that makes sense. I'm going to assume that's because it's going to be a series, or it is a series. This one was originally published in July of this year, so I don't imagine. Yeah, there's not a second book yet, though the second book's been announced. I like multiple POV books, but having 6 POVs is kind of overkill. I do intend on finishing it, but again, I was reading this before the trip and I was just so nervous. I was just like, I don't have the bandwidth to jump around all these characters all the time, but otherwise I didn't have really any issues with the story on its own. The next book I started and didn't finish was We Who Will Die by Stasia Stark, and I got 10-15-ish% through, and it's very romantic-y. Very romantic-y. My biggest complaint so far is that I think the world building is very disparate. So you're following a young woman who has 2 little brothers, one of whom has a serious lung illness. So she's struggling to afford his medicine when she is approached by a vampire, who is basically like, hey, I need you to compete essentially at the Colosseum and win so that you can try and assassinate the emperor. And she's like, why would I do that? And he's like, if you do it, I will kill your brother. And she's like, well, I don't really have anything to lose at this point, because either you're going to kill me, my brother's going to die, or those guys are going to kill me. So I might as well have them kill me if you're going to save my brother. So she agrees to this. And it is also revealed that most people, half of the people, have magical powers. That is shown via like magical runes on their forehead. And so she is special in that she has the runes, but they never activated. So she's kind of seen as like wasted potential. And obviously there's different rankings based on like how big your marking has grown and like the color. There's like bronze, silver, gold. So that's playing into it. And it's very Roman vibes. Obviously they have a Colosseum arena type place where they fight to the death. And I just didn't, it just felt like a lot of very disparate things coming at me at once. I didn't otherwise have any issues with the style or the writing or anything, but the concept kind of feels like they just drew terms out of a hat. Vampires, Romans, magical crowns. Oh, okay. And it's also really obvious right off the bat who the male lead is, which is something I don't love. But it's not being published until December 30th, so I still have some time to try and read it. I also started Katabasis by R.F. Kuang. So far, really loving it. I think I only got like 10% in. You're seeing a trend. And that's when I had started it when I got the Jasad Crown. And so I was like, I just read the Jasad Air. I need to get over to the sequel. But so far, I was loving Katabasis. I was kind of laughing though, because all those reviews saying like, it's just like a textbook. And I'm like, have y'all read a textbook before? But maybe I just haven't gotten to the textbooky parts. No notes so far. It seems like it's going to be great. But so that was November. Overall, not a very good run. My anxiety really gets the best of me sometimes. Hopefully all those books that I just talked about that I didn't finish, I will be able to finish in December. No plans to travel. I do plan, though, in January to maybe get a LASIK revision. I don't know. I'm really nervous about that, too. What if they blind me forever? Because they already messed up once. It's just especially disheartening because everyone I meet who has had LASIK is like, my vision's perfect. Better than perfect. And then I cannot see. Gotta let it go. Well, that is all for now. I will see you next time.